I bet Jeffrey thinks I'm gonna make a twist on chicken. Well, you know what? I'm gonna rock his world. I'm gonna make pastitsio, which is like a Greek lasagna. So the first thing I've done is saute 1.5 cups of onions in about 3 tablespoons of olive oil. What I'm gonna add is 1 pound of ground beef and 1 pound of ground lamb. It's the lamb that makes it so Greek. No chicken anywhere. You just put it right into the onions. And this is gonna cook for about 8 to 10 minutes until the meat is really browned and completely cooked through, and the onions will be nice and caramelized. What I was looking for is a dish that's like lasagna, where you make the whole thing in one dish, it goes into the oven, and you just serve it, the entire meal as one dish. And I started doing some research, and I realized the Greeks have something called pastitsio, which is really a lasagna, but it's baked with tomatoes and spices like cinnamon and oregano in the bottom, ground meat, and pasta, and then has this big thick layer of bechamel and cheese on the top. It's absolutely delicious. So that's basically what this is. It's like a Greek lasagna. I use 2 kinds of meat, beef and lamb, and I just think that gives it great flavor. And what I'm doing here is just browning the meat for about 8 to 10 minutes, along with the onions, just until it's cooked. And then I'm gonna add all kinds of delicious spices. Now I'm gonna add 1/2 cup of a dry red wine. I always add Côte de Rhône because it's what I like. I always pick something that I can drink and cook with. And the good news is when Jeffrey goes to the store to get me dry red wine, he knows I like Côte de Rhône. Just cook that down a little bit. Okay, that's the ground meat and the red wine. Now I'm gonna add lots of delicious flavors. First thing is garlic, big rough chop. You can add as much as you like. Then I'm gonna add cinnamon, which is a really classic Greek combination of lamb and cinnamon. It just gives it a nice piquant flavor. Usually cinnamon here is used for sweet things, but I love it in savory things. So I'm gonna put a whole tablespoon in. Okay, next is dried oregano. That's classic Greek too. I actually like dried oregano rather than fresh because oregano is so strong, it sort of overpowers it. Pinch of cayenne pepper. As big a pinch as you like, it's hot. And about a teaspoon of fresh thyme leaves. I love the flavor of thyme, so I use fresh thyme leaves. You can just sort of approximate it. So this is ground meat, onions, garlic, and lots of seasonings. It's gonna make a delicious base for the pastitsio. Give it a big stir. This is gonna cook for about 5 minutes. In the meantime, I'm gonna get some tomatoes to put in. Okay, so I'm gonna use 1 whole can of crushed tomatoes in puree. It's really thick, and it's gonna make a fabulous sauce. This is a good one to use for crushed tomatoes, and the thick puree actually makes a much thicker sauce. So you always want to find tomatoes in puree. Pour that whole thing in. Get all of it. 2 teaspoons of salt. One teaspoon of pepper. That's just gonna simmer away for about 40 to 45 minutes until it's thick and spicy and delicious. And then I'm gonna add some pasta. I know what kind of trouble Jeffrey's getting into. Oh, this ground meat looks just incredible. It's thick and it's rich and it just looks delicious. Okay, next I need some pasta. So get a big pot of boiling water, lots of salt so the pasta has good flavor. And what I'm using is something that's called, and I'm sure I'm pronouncing this wrong, conchigliette, which is small shells. You can use any kind of small shells, but these are really good ones. 3/4 of a pound. So it's most of the box. Give it a big stir. And that's gonna cook for about 8 minutes. But check the box that you're using and make sure you've got the right amount of time. You wanna just undercook it because I'm gonna put it into the sauce and then I'm gonna bake it. And so it's gonna cook a little longer. But it's gonna really absorb all the flavors of the meat and the spices. Small shells are wonderful because they sort of distribute themselves through the sauce. It's gonna be so good. I'm not usually crazy about surprises. Well, unless I'm in on the surprise. But Jeffrey and I decided we were gonna surprise each other for dinner on Friday night. I'm not telling him what we're having, and I don't even know what he's up to. So I'm making pastitsio. I've already got the meat sauce done, and now I'm gonna make the cheese sauce. So the first thing I need to do is heat up some milk and cream. I've got 1.5 cups of milk and 1 cup of cream. What I'm doing is I'm making a bechamel, which is a white sauce. And while that heats up, I'm going to make the roux. I've got 4 tablespoons of butter that I've melted in a pan. It's about a half a stick. I'm going to add a 1/4 cup of flour. It's just all-purpose flour. And just dump it all in at once. Point of this is actually to just cook the flour a little bit so you don't have that raw flour taste in it. Just cook it for about a minute. So the butter and flour are perfectly cooked. They're not browned. Just for about a minute, I'm going to switch to a whisk. Just to make sure I get a nice, smooth cream sauce. I'm going to pour the milk and cream in, whisking it. No lumps here. And then later, I'm going to add lots of cheese, Parmesan and yogurt. So Pastitsio is like a Greek lasagna, and it's got meat and shells and delicious tomato sauce on the bottom and a nice cheese sauce, bechamel on the top, and it's all baked together, so it's an entire meal in one dish. Okay, so this is nice and thick, and now I'm gonna add some flavors. 1/4 teaspoon of nutmeg, teaspoon of salt, teaspoon of pepper. Next, Parmesan cheese. I'm going to put about 3/4 cup of grated Parmesan into the sauce and then save 3/4 cup for the topping so it gets nice and brown and crusty. Okay, give it a big stir. And then I do one other thing. I put 1/2 cup of the meat sauce with the tomatoes and the spices right into the cheese topping. I just think it flavors it and it makes it pink, and I think it looks fantastic. This is going to cool for about 10 minutes. Okay, cheese sauce is cooled. Now I'm going to put the pasta right into the tomato sauce. So these are the shells. And just mix it all together. Oh, this looks fantastic. Big baking dish. Any size, just make sure it's big enough. Okay, and just pour it all right in. This is the bottom layer, and then the top layer is all that beautiful bechamel with cheese and yogurt. It smells delicious. Really can smell the cinnamon. Okay, just smooth the top. And now the sauce, if it was just a sauce, would sort of seep through it. So I'm going to add 2 things that are going to make sure it's a layer on top. The first one is eggs. So I'm sort of making the bechamel sauce into a custard. 2 eggs. And this way you want to cool the sauce a little bit so it doesn't cook the eggs, so it just thickens it. Okay, so just stir the eggs right into the hot bechamel. And since it's Pastitsio, I say that 3 times, I'm going to add Greek yogurt, 2/3 cup. That actually makes it a little thicker, and it adds that nice tang that yogurt has. So I'm just going to eyeball 2/3 cup. And just stir it all in. And now when it bakes, it's going to bake right on top of the layer of the meat and tomatoes and shells. This looks fantastic. Okay, so I'm just going to pour this on top. Just smooth it right over the top of it. And just to make sure there's enough cheese and to brown the top, I'm going to add 3/4 cup of Parmesan cheese right to the top. Just sprinkle it evenly over the top of it. I mean, does this look delicious? I don't think Jeffrey will be disappointed. Okay, into the oven, 350 degrees for an hour, and it's going to be hot and bubbly, and he's going to be a very happy guy. And that's Pastitsio.